The first thing Aiden Ross learned about love was that it came with a leash. From the day he was old enough to form thoughts, his parents Gregory and Helena Ross made sure he understood one rule: we control your future, Aiden, because we built it. They said it with the kind of certainty that made it sound like love. When he was 6, it meant they chose what toys he could play with. When he was 10, it meant they picked his friends based on their parents' wealth. And when he turned 18, it meant signing papers that bound him tighter than any chain. He still remembered that day, the mahogany table, the golden pen, the lawyer's rehearsed smile, his father's voice cold, precise. This trust will secure your future, son. We're only protecting you from making foolish decisions. His mother nodded, placing her hand on Aiden's shoulder. You're too young to understand the weight of money, darling. Let us carry it for now. Aiden signed. He didn't realize he was signing away the right to breathe freely. Years passed. He grew into a quiet man with sharp eyes and soft manners. On the surface, he had everything: expensive suits, a penthouse apartment paid for by the family allowance, and the envy of people who didn't know better. But his life wasn't his own. Every purchase required approval. Every job offer had to be reviewed by the family. Even the woman he loved was dismissed as unsuitable by his mother's cutting words. Helena's voice still echoed in his head the night she found out Aiden planned to move in with her. You think you can build a life without us? We control your future, Aiden. You'll come back when reality crushes you. And he did, at least for a while, because the trust fund was locked and his parents held every key. At 22, he swallowed his pride and took a job his father arranged. He spent his days working for people who whispered about him being the family's spoiled heir. No one knew that Aiden spent his nights differently. Every night when the city went quiet, he sat by his laptop under the dim light of his small desk lamp, studying finance, corporate law, and investment management. He devoured every course, every book, every legal document he could find online. He learned how wealth moved, how it hid, how it was controlled, and more importantly, how it could be reclaimed. 5 years later, at 27, he had become something his parents never imagined, a man who understood their language, money, law, and power better than they did. He was no longer their obedient son. He was a strategist, calm and dangerous in silence. When he applied for a job at Bradford and Klein Investment Management, no one cared about his family name. They cared about results, and Aiden delivered. His analytical mind, his calm demeanor, and his uncanny ability to manage Hive, portfolios, made him the firm's rising star. Within 2 years, he was promoted to senior consultant. Ironically, he now managed millions for the same kind of people his parents once dined with: arrogant, controlling, untouchable. He smiled quietly whenever one of them said, "My children don't know what's good for them," because he knew exactly how that story ended. Then, one evening, as he reviewed a new set of clients, his eyes stopped at a familiar name buried inside corporate paperwork. A hidden trust and account managed under a shell company, the Ross Family Fund. He froze, heart pounding, fingers trembling over the keyboard. It was theirs, his parents' entire empire, hidden, disguised, and ironically about to be placed under his professional management. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the glowing screen, the irony pressing into his chest like a knife. A slow smile crept across his face. "You said you control my future," he whispered. "Let's see how much control you have left." That night, as rain tapped against his window, Aiden opened a blank notebook and wrote 3 words at the top of the first page: Golden Cage Exit Plan. The boy who once signed his freedom away was gone. In his place stood a man who had learned the language of control and was finally ready to rewrite the script. The office was silent that night. Rows of monitors hummed, and beyond the glass walls, the city glowed like a circuit board, a living map of power. Aiden sat at his desk, staring at the encrypted documents that carried his family's legacy. He didn't move for a long time. It wasn't shock that froze him, it was irony. After all the years his parents spent telling him, "You're not ready to handle responsibility," fate had placed their entire empire under his fingertips. Their trust, their companies, their hidden offshore accounts, and not one of them knew that the man responsible for managing their fortune was the son they once treated as a financial liability. Aiden knew the system well, every transaction, every clause, every loophole. He spent weeks reviewing every document connected to the Ross family trust. It was worth more than he expected, nearly $90 million spread across international funds, real estate investments, and confidential accounts registered under shell companies. All of it hidden, all of it guarded by legal armor, the same armor they used to keep him out. But this time, Aiden wasn't knocking on their door, he was building a new one. His first move was simple: silence. He made sure his identity remained invisible to the trustees. The name listed in all records was A. Ross, and nothing more. To them, he was just another professional manager handling high net worth portfolios. He managed the fund with perfect discipline. Every quarter, profits grew. Every year, performance reports impressed the board. His parents, unaware of who was behind it, praised the new manager for his precision and discretion. They even sent a thank you letter once. Helena's signature at the bottom made his chest tighten, not from affection, but from the sharp edge of memory. "We appreciate your reliability, Mr. Ross. Your professionalism has been a great comfort to our family." He almost laughed. Comfort, the same people who made his life a cage, now slept peacefully because of his competence. 5 years passed like that, quietly, efficiently, invisibly. In that time, Aiden grew stronger, colder, more deliberate. He became an expert in control, the very word his parents once used as a weapon. But power alone wasn't enough. He needed understanding. He studied the structure of the trust, the clauses that granted absolute control to Gregory and Helena. And then, buried deep in a file nobody had read in decades, he found it. A clause written in old legal language, almost forgotten, giving temporary control to the acting trust manager in the event of non-performance, negligence, or moral misconduct by the primary trustees. A small, dusty line, but to Aiden it was gold. He didn't act immediately. Revenge, he learned, wasn't about speed, it was about timing. He continued managing their assets, growing their wealth, and quietly rearranging key structures. He created new holding companies legally sound, transparent on paper, but subtly aligned under a master entity. A shell company, his company. It was like watching dominoes fall in slow motion, each move small enough to go unnoticed, but each one building towards something inevitable. Aiden wasn't stealing from them. He was teaching them in the only language they understood. One evening, as he reviewed quarterly reports, a new client meeting appeared on his calendar. It was a standard compliance review for the Ross Family Trust. He looked at the date and smiled. Monday, 10 a.m. A meeting with primary trustees, Gregory and Helena Ross. For a long time, he just sat there, letting the irony sink in. The people who once made him beg for his own allowance would now sit across from him, unaware that the man who managed their wealth had been their prisoner for half his life. That night, Aiden poured himself a glass of whiskey and stood by the window, looking at the glittering skyline. He thought about the last time he'd seen his parents, their cold smiles, their subtle insults, the way they made him feel small even as an adult. He remembered his father's words the day he left their mansion. "You'll come back, Aiden, because you can't survive without us." Aiden raised the glass to his reflection in the window and whispered, "I didn't just survive, Father. I thrived." The glass touched his lips, but he didn't drink. He placed it down slowly, deliberately, and opened his notebook, the same one that once held Golden Cage exit plan. On a fresh page, he wrote, Stage 2, the unveiling. The next morning, an email went out from his office. A simple professional invitation. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Ross, your trust portfolio has been performing exceptionally well. As part of our 5-year management review, we would like to schedule a face-to-face meeting to discuss future direction and control clauses. Best regards, a Ross Senior Portfolio Manager, Bradford & Klein. He hit send and closed his laptop. For the first time in his life, Aiden Ross didn't feel like a son or a victim. He felt like an equal, no, something greater. Because the people who once said, "We control your future," were finally walking into a meeting where the balance of power would shift forever. The conference room smelled of glass, polish, and expensive perfume, the kind that clung to old money. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of Bradford & Klein Tower, painting gold lines across the floor. Aiden stood by the window, watching the skyline, his reflection sharp and unrecognizable. He had been waiting for this moment for years, the meeting that would close the circle. At exactly 10 o'clock, the door opened. His parents walked in, as elegant and commanding as ever. Gregory Ross wore his usual charcoal suit, posture stiff with authority. Helena followed in a white designer coat, her pearls gleaming like trophies. They looked around, expecting another faceless manager, someone they could charm or intimidate. Their eyes landed on Aiden, and for the first time in their lives, both of them froze. Helena blinked. Aiden, Gregory's voice was colder. What is this? Aiden smiled faintly and gestured toward the chairs. Please sit. We have business to discuss. They hesitated. His tone wasn't that of a son, it was the calm authority of a man who didn't need their approval. Finally, Gregory sat. Explain. Aiden took his seat across from them, opened his laptop, and turned the screen toward them. The Ross Family Trust, he began, his voice steady. Over the past 5 years, I've managed your assets through Bradford & Klein. You've been my clients since the day your fund was transferred to our firm. Helena's lips parted in disbelief. You mean to say, yes, he interrupted gently. For the past 5 years, I've been your trust fund manager. The silence that followed was suffocating. Gregory's jaw clenched. You had no right. Aiden looked at him, calm, unshaken. The firm assigned the case. I did my job, exceptionally well, I might add. He turned the screen back toward himself and began scrolling through charts, profits, growth curves, offshore reports. Your wealth increased by 34% under my management. Every cent accounted for. I built it stronger than it ever was. Helena found her voice again. If you think this stunt will win you sympathy, this isn't a stunt, Aiden said quietly. This is a revelation. He clicked another file open, legal documents with highlighted sections. You see, I found a clause in your trust, one you both signed decades ago. It allows temporary control to shift to the active manager in case of negligence, unethical behavior, or misuse of funds. He looked directly into his father's eyes, and lately, your charitable foundation has been under investigation for fraudulent tax claims.